Hi and hello, and welcome to today's broadcast of Make Politics Interesting, in the interest of which I am wearing a wig. Oh, what were those two notes? I hope that's not too loud or offensive. I'm Davina. I'm here to try and make politics interesting as part of raising my voice against the threat of escalating fascism, eroding democracy, etc., etc. Takes many voices of decent people when you have a worldwide inclination to descend into fascism. Note the fascist uprising in Brazil currently, where part of their population has been seditiously rioting in an effort to overthrow the elected government, and then mirroring what happened in America on January the 6th, in which investigations have revealed there was much shenanigans and plotting and legal strategizing and trying to abuse constitutional provisions for contingent elections in the event of election disputes. There was a lot of court cases that don't get talked about enough, just at least in terms of 60 defeats from Donald Trump. For Donald Trump's team of say anything lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, Sydney, what's her face? Oh, Sydney. I'm glad to have forgotten her name, but I can use the internet to remind myself of Kraken infamy. Sydney, start with P? Sidney Powell. Yes, Sidney Powell. And Trump was even toying with the idea of nominating her to be an emergency special prosecutor, an emergency attorney general to investigate what he claimed and had been plotting to claim even before the election happened was fraud, depriving him of his rightful win. So let's have a look at what I've got up on screen, because Hakeem Jeffries has proved he is excellent with words. Not just, oh, wow, what commendable words, but good job, Hakeem, at taking the narrative by forcibly taking control of the narrative, because Republicans are relatively untethered to the truth at this moment in history and feel confident with notoriety-driven stunts, stunts that weaponize the kind of intellectual holes that people are susceptible to falling down. At any moment in history, people can throw away their ability to reason and think clearly and start subscribing to in-group, out-group dynamics, whereby you weld your sense of self to a political strongman or a political party that claims to be putting Germany first or America first or Brazil first, and you fall for repetitive slogans that mask generally coalitions of kleptocrats, powerful thieves who will deny your nation good governance and will bring horrible havoc to bear on your nation eventually, even if it's not blatantly obvious to you at first. And even as it becomes blatantly obvious to other people, the most loyal, the most down the rabbit hole cult members will still continue to insist that Hitler meant well and did a lot for the country, similarly with Trump and Bolsonaro. So Hakeem Jeffries, going back to his choice of words, he described a Republican subcommittee as the Committee on Insurrection Protection. It's nice, it rhymes. It's got rhythm. He's referring to the newly approved Republican devised House Subcommittee on Weaponization of the Federal Government. That's going to be their vehicle for trying to undermine the legal grounds or to try to intimidate the legal teams that have been put together to prosecute those who sought to overthrow democratic government for the people, by the people, etc., on and around January the 6th of 2021. So yes, that was the insurrection. In many ways, it continues. Trump still tries to use elements of his insurrection strategy, i.e. amplifying racist tendencies to buy garbage arguments. to buy falsities, in that idea that he understands well, as Voltaire expressed it, those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. And Trump wants people to continue to commit atrocities on his behalf. It's his strategy to protect himself from legal consequences through intimidating those people who compose various elements of the legal system, the prosecutors, the attorney generals, the teams of people whose job it is to uphold the rule of law in the United States. Trump hopes to harness the intimidatory power of domestic terrorism through pushing absurdities on his most loyal followers, because the more absurd things they believe, the more violent they will get to defend their warped reality from the conflict that then naturally occurs with other people who will point out that it's not true and that they believe untruths. So where racism comes into play in that Trump uses the two targeted election workers from Georgia, Ruby Freeman and her daughter Shay Moss. Shay Moss, employed for years as an election supervisor. Her mother was a volunteer during the 2020 presidential elections. They were working during a time of a pandemic, so at risk to their own health. They were helping be the moving cogs in the system of a functional democracy. And as a consequence of that, the fact that there were videos obtained of them, Ruby Moss passing her daughter a ginger mint, that yes, suitcases are used, or wheelie bins that look like suitcases, that votes are transported. Not every single thousands of votes are not just passed in a bundle with a rubber band around it. They're transported in things to continue counting, and that the counting often occurs through the night because not all of the votes of millions of voters, American voters, can be counted during the day. But Trump was trying to take advantage of the fact that in-person voters would be weighted towards Trump, because in-person voters were people who disregarded the threat of COVID because Trump told them to. Trump specifically hyped that that COVID wasn't a genuine threat to people, that they could ignore it. And if they were going to think about COVID, it should just be to generate hostility towards people of apparent Asian background, because he fomented xenophobia as well by blaming China in a way that didn't even focus on making accusations towards the Chinese government, that just focused on using the word China, so that people who don't make sensible decisions, people who don't, people who live their life on the edge of mental wellness, and therefore can be more easily tipped over the edge by a high-profile person saying negative things about a race of people or a nation of people, so that anybody of Asian appearance, since the day that Trump began his campaign of xenophobic impulse cultivation and amplification and weaponization, that they would be more likely to attack Asian people, and if not indulging in directly violent impulses, indulging in blame impulses to help deflect blame away from Trump, so that people were less likely to evaluate what happened, pardon me, and say, yes, Trump should have done a better job as a leader of the United States in that period of crisis, but instead manipulated the situation to try and heighten the divide between those tempted to vote for Biden and those voting for Trump, so that Biden voters would be more likely to vote by mail and therefore have their votes counted after the in-person votes had been counted and reported on, to better bolster Trump's claim that the election results were stolen from him, and that Black election workers such as Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss were part of an elaborate scheme by inauthentic Americans, the kind of Americans who racist people are more likely to lean into arguments that they are the center of wrongdoing or election fraud or illegitimate voting, that Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, brave, besieged women who deserve our gratitude, our thanks, our respect, and our support during this time of their life, which is still difficult because the former president of the United States is still drawing every day a target on their backs for violence, for disruption, for feelings of fear and persecution, well-founded fears. But even if nothing directly happens to them, even if they are fortunate enough to be spared violence, they have to live every day with the mental burden of a legitimate fear of violence. Even Kanye West sent his former publicist to talk with Shay Moss and tell her that she should confess. Otherwise, there was going to be a mob at their house, and Kanye, would not be able to guarantee protection from that mob. Just Trump supporters were in on that idea of blame Black women. And the fact that there are such high levels of susceptibility still to the temptation to irrationally blame Black women for problems that are made up speaks to the persistence of pernicious racism, whether it be unconscious, whether it be conscious, malicious, exploitative cultivation of racism and racist impulses. We have to inform ourselves of it in order to, like, as people vaccinate their immune system, to prime their immune system with recognition of and awareness of threats to bodily integrity, so must decent, rational people prime themselves with recognition and understanding of threats to our mental functioning and our mental well-being. Our ability to engage accurately with the facts can only exist when we continue to prime our brain with recognition of the likely biases that will contaminate our thinking, the likely biases that will pull us away from the truth, that will appear before us as some kind of a consensus often, or a shared understanding that we should buy into because it's common sense, it's persuasive, it's a widespread practice. That is part of the perniciousness of racism, which is that people will often accept it as the status quo and will defend the status quo in order to prevent upset or a rocked boat, or that kind of situation where you're crossing a stream on a horse and you don't want the horse to be startled mid-passage. This is often an explanation of the defensive instincts of white people who don't want their children to be better educated than they themselves were. They don't want their children to learn accurate history. Therefore, they're tempted to buy into Republican characterizations of the school curriculum as being critical race theory and an imposition on their white children who might feel the stirrings of negative association once they realize that some of the mythology of American exceptionalism is exceptionally immoral, profiteering off enslavement, brutality, might is right, and even white Christian rationalizing of the practice of enslavement in order to sell the idea of inherent white superiority. And that Christian religion in America was often complicit with that and is not the peaches and cream and rainbows institution that is often still revered as today. Christianity has a lot of answering to do. Look, so do a lot of religions that have helped people, but often helped rationalize for people the worst kind of behaviors in societies. All right. So I'm going back to praising Christopher likes my new hairstyle. It is a wig. It is Bad Wig Wednesday. So thank you to Christopher for joining, and anybody else who's watching now and in the replay, welcome. Yesterday was a sad day because of a journalist I follow who took his own life. So I apologize if I was a bit of a downer yesterday. That was something that I was hoping didn't take over my mood too much, but it kind of did. I only found out about it when I logged on prior to the broadcast, and then I was sad. But today I've processed. Yes, sometimes people are sad and they struggle with it. My advice for people struggling with sadness is to find ways to put down whatever burdens aren't yours to carry. So if it does really disturb you that racism and wrongdoing exist, and I can see how that's tempting, you don't have to accept the entirety of that burden. You can say, make it manageable to yourself. So it's shameful to have a history littered with racism and bad behavior, but you know what? We've still got to save our energy for dealing with ongoing problems with racism and cowardice with regards to problems that we should address now, like climate change. So problems of racial justice and environmental justice. These are all things we need to save our energy for. So don't try and take it all on yourself to say, I need to feel bad. My existence is somehow invalid because of the weight of all of these things that my society and my skin color demographic is part of and continues to be part of. If you used to vote Republican or you still do vote Republican and you want to be able to functionally deal with your life and look at the world with a fresh eye and not just weighted down with the guilt of having been wrong. If it's hard for you to cope with having been wrong about things, then accept yourself. Accept that people are often wrong about things. You don't have to carry the shame to such an extent that you can't function. Because if you have a spark of decency in your soul, then you are needed, you are wanted, and you can be part of a new coalition that stands strong to address the problems that we as thinking, feeling adults should address now for ourselves, for our communities, for our families, for our children and their future as well. So yes, I'm so pleased that Representative Hakeem Jeffries, the new minority leader of the House of Representatives for the Democratic Party, that he has directed attention to the sham group meant to deflect and protect the Sedition Caucus from accountability. Those who conspired with Donald Trump, to what extent we don't even entirely know yet, but they were part of the plot to delay the certification of Joe Biden's victory in order to falsely activate that provision of the Constitution, the 12th Amendment, I've got it in here, whereby if you can pretend that one presidential candidate didn't receive the majority of votes, then you can falsely use this amendment. You can claim at least some legitimacy. You can try to claim legitimacy. This was their plan. That the House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote. I'm going to highlight that, except I don't want to damage my pocket copy of the Constitution. It's page 66 in my copy. It's what they were trying to make happen. They were trying to make fetch happen, fetch being the contingent election clause, provision, whatever, of the Constitution, to say, well, it's contentious. Joe Biden didn't receive a clear majority because if he had, then he would have been certified on the 6th of January. It would have been certified. But look, we had people objecting. We had all these Republicans in the House and some Republicans in the Senate putting their names forward to complain and say these election results are invalid. How do we know? Trump lost 60 court cases. Well, will we represent voters who have concerns? Why do they have concerns? Because Trump vouched for fraud. He said there was so much fraud. He said it was stolen for him, and that's why they have concerns. So therefore, we are saying it. Therefore, the certification shouldn't proceed. Therefore, that violates the part of the Constitution that says when there's a victor, their votes should be counted on January the 6th, and that's how it's done. If that doesn't get done, their plan was to then say, well, we didn't follow the normal course of action. The Constitution has already been derailed. And so now we have to proceed to the next step, which is to hold a contingent election, House of Representatives voting, but only one delegate from each state, which just happens to come to 66. Not 66 is the page. 26 delegates for Republicans and 24 delegates for Democrats. If each of those Republicans voted for Trump in a contingent election, that's how he would have won. And the violence at the Capitol was part of that plan because Mike Pence wasn't going along with delaying the certification of Biden's win. So Trump needed to make sure all those people he had summoned to the Capitol could take his bidding to the next step and into the Capitol grounds, disrupt the proceedings, delay the official proceedings, and cause the specific date provision of the Constitution to be derailed. Let me see if I can find a website to support that, because I don't know what page. January 6th, specified as a date in the Constitution for the certification of a presidential election win. All right, I found an article, WUSA. What's that? Looks like a news channel. The date is fixed for do electoral college votes have to be certified by January the 6th? What happens next? So this is an article that was written on January the 6th of 2021 when people had that question specifically because of the attack on the Capitol. And I'm guessing it was a question because people understood that was part of the Constitution. So the date is fixed for January the 6th, but has been changed before. In order for the date to be changed, lawmakers must pass new legislation. I'm looking for which part of the code it is. Okay, it looks like it's 3 US Code 16. Such joint meeting shall not be dissolved until the count of electoral votes shall be completed and the results declared. All right, and no recess shall be taken unless a question shall have arisen in regard to counting any such votes, or otherwise under this subchapter. So that's part of the US Code. So is that not part of the Constitution? Okay, so part of the code, and they were hoping that would be derailed. Where is the date of this, though? Is it not specified in the Constitution then? Well, that's remiss on my part if it's not actually in the Constitution. The date of January 6th. I was right to read from the 12th Amendment with regards to the contingent election provision, saying that House of Representatives shall choose immediately by ballot the president, but the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote. And I've seen it confirmed before that 26 votes would have been Republican. The Republicans controlled 26 states, so they would have had maybe I have to get more specific with my Googling. Thanks for following me along with this question. Is January the 6th mentioned in the Constitution? Okay, it has been said in the Constitution. All right. I just don't know which page. Fine. Oh, and when it links to the United States Constitution as a reference in the news article I was reading from, but it doesn't link to what page. Each objection can take up to 2 hours. All right. In 2013, a date was pushed to January the 4th. Oh, when January the 6th fell on a Sunday one time. All right. And the Electoral Count Act requires Congress to begin counting the Electoral College votes on January the 6th, but it need not end that day. All right. All right. Well, that was an interesting article. Thank you for abiding with me while I found that out for myself. And I had this big thing on the screen the whole time. All right, let's go back to Twitter, because a journalist today did a good thing, which is he shared a thread on various dirty little secrets of journalism. He's an ex-editor from the Chicago Tribune and Sunday Times, now allowed to have opinions, co-author of 8 books on history and photography. So Mark Jacob, he said, number 1, when a reporter writes a warm human interest story about a politician, it's often an attempt to soften up the politician to get a better story later. Stories that make politicians look good are known in the business as beat sweeteners. Sometimes, secrets of journalism continued. Number 2, sometimes an anonymous source in a news story is the main person the story is about. And I encountered this phenomenon one time when Kellyanne was being reported on, specifically her relationship with her husband, George Conway. Kellyanne was a spokesperson for the Trump administration. George Conway was someone who had come out publicly to condemn Trump. And he was also a conservative, a Republican, married to Kellyanne Conway, and part of the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society. So it was a big deal when somebody pulls away from their herd to say, I condemn their leader. It's a deviation that attracts attention. So, of course, how do they stay married to each other was a question attracting attention too. The Washington Post were doing this soft story on what's it like inside the dynamics of Kellyanne Conway and George Conway's marriage. But Kellyanne was talking to a journalist and she hadn't said this is off the record. So she was quoted as saying, oh, you can say a source close to Kellyanne says that, she experiences a lot of hurt and disappointment or something like that. And the journalist reminds Kellyanne, well, you're not off the record. This is on the record. And it must have felt like such a betrayal to her that he quoted her as saying, say a source close to Kellyanne said. But also he was revealing some of the methodology of his profession, that journalists, when they're writing, a source close to the person said, they're often quoting that person who just doesn't want to be held accountable for their remarks, but wants to give their perspective. Maybe they don't want to fully legitimize even the story, but they want to say something about it. They'll say, quote me as a source close to the person, or that will just be the understanding that the journalist has. I'm off the record, but you know what to do. A source close to Kellyanne, a source close to Trump says he blah, 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 blah. All right. Secrets of journalism number 3. This is very educational for us. When journalists use the phrase observers say, sometimes it means they didn't get anyone on the record, but thought it was true. So they put the idea out there anyway. The observers might be anyone, lobbyists or drinking buddies, your next door neighbor. Observers say. I forgot to get my water. All right, why don't I'll just find something for people to watch that has a video, and then I'll go get water. Yes. Congress is going to need to raise the debt limit without conditions, but all right, this is good. Please, I'll leave you in the capable hands of White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, discussing with Fox's lurky journalist Pete Doocy that fact that, yes, there were some documents discovered.
How can President Biden be trusted moving forward with America's secrets?
Because his lawyers, his team did the right thing.
But he had a closet with
His
classified
lawyers
information in
did
it
the
that
right.
they found. How did it get
Again.
Did the
He
lawyers
did.
do
He
the
was
right thing?
surprised that the records were there. He spoke to this
But they were
personally.
there.
He was surprised that the records were there, And when his lawyers found out and his team found out that they were there, they turned it over to their archives. And now it's being reviewed by the Department of Justice.
How can President Biden be trusted moving forward with America's secrets?
Because his lawyers, his team did the right thing.
But he had a closet with
His
classified
lawyers
information in
did
it
the
that
right.
they found. How did it get there?
Again.
Did the
He
lawyers
did.
do
He
the
was
right thing?
surprised that the records were there. He spoke to this
But they were
personally.
there.
He was surprised
right.
that the records were there. And when his lawyers found out and his team found out that they were there, they turned it over to their archives. And now it's being reviewed by the Department of Justice.
How can President Biden be trusted moving forward with America's secrets?
Because his lawyers, his team did the right thing.
Yes, President Biden did the right thing. So thank you, White House Secretary. And Peter Doocy, hilarious that they have the nerve to pretend that what Biden did is anyway equivalent to Trump willfully taking documents. And then when their absence became evident to the National Archives, refusing to return the documents, saying they're his, saying, well, Obama did it, getting his lawyers to sign a declaration saying, yep, all the documents have been returned, and then complaining that his non-compliance and a whistleblower pointing out that Trump was in fact still moving around these secret documents, leading to a subpoena and then a search warrant validated by a judge who said, yes, there is evidence of potential wrongdoing here, enough so that you can search the residency of a former president. And they executed that search warrant. They turned up boxes and boxes, thousands of documents, many of which were classified, some of which were even top secret. And Trump has come out and accused Biden of selling secrets to or giving secrets to China, which we all know Trump's strategy is that probably means he did it, that Trump gave secrets to China. I would not be surprised. He was really trying to leverage his business relationship with China to his own advantage. And I'm talking about not only the copyright deals for his daughter Ivanka Trump, but also, his granddaughter learned the Chinese national anthem at one point to ingratiate Trump to President Xi. And he was tweeting at the beginning of the pandemic in January of 2020 that COVID was being entirely contained, that China was doing great, that President Xi was doing a great job, and that it was nothing to worry about, evidently as a way to ingratiate himself to the Chinese government. I'm going to Google Trump granddaughter, because I don't like to make these assertions. Chinese. I mean, I congratulate Trump's granddaughter for learning Chinese and being able to sing a song to President Xi. It's actually a commendable accomplishment. But from Trump, in contrast to what his rhetoric about the Chinese people more broadly is just a bad contrast with, there's a button that just lets me share this tab instead. Am I sharing that tab now? Did I manage to just switch? I did. I've learned how to do a new thing. All right. I'm going to press play on this. You must be tired after a full day's work. The video was shown at a welcoming banquet at the conclusion of Trump's first official visit to China.
China can fix this problem easily and quickly. And I am calling on China and your great president to hopefully work on it very hard.
Of purchasing Boeing aircraft with a value of $37 billion US dollars, with a value of $11.7 billion US dollars.
It is a very one-sided and unfair one, but I don't blame China. After all, who can blame a country for being able to take advantage of another country for the benefit of its citizens? I give China great credit.
谢谢特朗普总统。 中美元首共建记者到此结束，谢谢两位元首，谢谢大家。
All right. So Trump's granddaughter, Arabella Trump, she's so cute. So that was a very cute performance 5 years ago. She must be old, considerably, 5 years older than that. And good for her. Good for her being able to sing such a beautiful song. I just want to contrast Trump's typical strongman playbook antics, which, look, the dude learned from reading Hitler's collected speeches. We know that he had a copy of that on his bedside table. His first ex-wife, Ivana Trump, had put that information in the divorce proceedings. It was confirmed by Vanity Fair journalist in 1995, Marie Brenner, who asked Trump if it was true that he had that book, and he said that it was given to him by a Jewish friend. And in fact, on Barbara Walters' death, there were videos on Twitter that showed her also asking Donald Trump about that book. She didn't, in the clip I saw, she wasn't going into a lot of detail, but she was saying, is it true you have Hitler's book? And he said, well, a friend gave it to me. I think he's Jewish. And Marie Brenner from Vanity Fair had followed up with the friend that he named and found that the friend, yes, was in Hollywood, but was not Jewish, and had just given Trump that book because he thought it would be interesting. Trump certainly did think it was interesting. He had it on his bedside table for a long time. So he was training himself. He was priming himself for how to be an authoritarian strongman, able to win the heart of the populace through, or at least the more gullible segment of the populace, through recitation of grievances. Through language that says, we have been badly done by you and me, and when they attack me, it's because they also hate you. It's the strongman playbook. And with regards to China, you say, oh, yes, China, they've taken advantage of us, it's terribly unfair, but you also try to ingratiate yourself with China and say, when it suits you, and say, yeah, well, who can blame you for taking advantage of us? I give you a lot of credit. And then what did he do next? Who remembers what Trump did next in his relationship with China? He did a lot of strongman posturing with trade, with tariffs on trade. And who knows what tariffs are? The American general public certainly doesn't get a lot of information about that from the media, and they should. The tariffs are a tax imposed on people importing goods into the United States. So if I was an Australian government imposing tariffs, I'd be imposing a tax on goods imported into Australia. So Australian businessmen wanting to sell goods to China would pay that tax. And when Trump imposed that tariff on Chinese goods, it sounds like he's punishing China, but he's adding costs to American businesses who import Chinese goods. And a lot of manufacturers in America buy Chinese component parts and do further assembly and sell the finished products here. All of that business was disrupted, all of that manufacturing, all of that retail business was disrupted by his posturing, his interest in saying, look how tough I am on China, look at these tariffs that I'm instituting to make things more fair for America, when it didn't make things more fair for America. It didn't, might have addressed one element of the trade balance, but it made agricultural businesses lose millions and millions of dollars. And Trump had to try and patch up that hole he created in American farmers' income by handing out $28 billion of American taxpayer cash to farmers who were noisy enough in vocalizing the hurt they'd suffered from those tariffs. Not a lot of small businesses benefited, small farming setups benefited from that $28 billion handout, but certainly large agribusinesses were able to fill in the forms to get the Trump administration to share some of that extraordinary taxpayer largesse with them. All unnecessary, all a consequence of Trump's trade war that he started whilst tweeting, I would add. Trade wars are good and easy to win. It was one of the most ludicrous things he said, massively underreported. The media should have really pointed out what a dereliction of duty that was, but they gravitate towards conflict. And at the time, there wasn't that much open conflict about it. It was just Trump showing China who's boss, except that really he was just hurting American farmers, American manufacturers, and American importers. And when Republicans hurt the economy, it is grossly under-discussed in the media because the media often sticks to narratives that favor Republicans, unfortunately, because media moguls are frequently Republicans in this day and age who have bought out media outlets with the interest of pushing a narrative that favors their ability to get tax breaks and tax subsidies, to sell the American public on a false idea that Republicans have some kind of financial management skills, that they're good for the American economy. Nope, they're good for propping up the size of the wallets of the wealthiest, including the media moguls who have been wealthy enough to purchase CNN, Fox. Rupert Murdoch obviously was someone who's been undermining truth and the credibility of the media in America for decades. But more recently, CNN has been purchased by a conservative person as well. What's his name? Chris Licht. Let's find out the name. Who bought CNN? It was founded by Ted Turner, who was potentially more left. I know he must have been more left because he married, what's her face? Jane Fonda, was so left that she was in opposition, open opposition to the Vietnam War at a time when that was more contentious. And Ted Turner, oh my gosh, it's not easy to get a name here. Billionaire Trump donor to take over CNN. Well, what's his name? Is it Malone? Oh my gosh. CNN's parent company is currently Warner Media. Is it John Malone? It's traded publicly on the stock exchange. New owner John Malone is not a rock-solid conservative, says the Daily Mail, which is a conservative outlet. All right. Okay. TV producer called Chris Licht, L-I-C-H-T, is now running CNN, and they planned to push CNN back to hard news, i.e. conservative favoring news. He's the chairman and chief executive officer, CEO of CNN Worldwide, was named to the post in April of 2022. All right, do you know what? I've got to go now. I'm going to take my fancy wig off. Thank you to those who've tuned in today to listen. If you enjoyed my wig, I'm happy to wear it again, because whatever within limits, whatever helps makes politics interesting. These are conversations we have to have with not just ourselves and our immediate family members, but we have to get comfortable having them with neighbors. We have to refine our ability to push back at the rampant disinformation. Disinformation that often favors Republicans and disinformation that undermines public health, the cause of environmental safety, climate justice, racial justice, educational justice, because there's a lot of children right now who are having books banned in their schools, having their history curriculums demolished in order to pander to the interests of conservative, hyped up parents taking over school boards, or, being noisier voices. A lot of states have passed legislation that individuals can write to school boards and ask for books to be banned. So there's a racist teacher in, is it Arkansas? And I'll find the thread and we'll go through it tomorrow. But she's extremely racist and homophobic, and she's personally filled out forms for over 250 books to be removed from the shelves of public schools in her state. And her students have reported that she's told them she's personally against race mixing, that she thinks God isn't interested in intermarriage or is against racial intermarriage. You know, the type of destructive, anti-pluralistic democracy, anti-equality, anti-racial equality in society, that she has an inherent hierarchy of merit in her head in which her white skin qualifies her as superior, and she doesn't want white skin to be contaminated. And she's also told people that various negative beliefs that she has about homosexuality as well. And having beliefs is one thing, but pushing on children your ideas that modern civilized society recognizes are destructive to harmonious and just to social harmony and to individual freedom, that people should be allowed to be gay without being ashamed, and that racial intermarriage most certainly is something that a civilized society should allow without question, and that race is in fact a social construct often used by racists to generate good feelings for themselves on the false premise that they have some kind of inherent superiority relevant to their melanin, relative low levels of melanin. All fabricated nonsense that, you know, people make things up to help them chart a course through life, to help reassure themselves, to help keep anxiety at bay. And there's certain beliefs that are more functional and certain false beliefs that are dysfunctional. I certainly wouldn't go up to anyone and say, do you think your baby's pretty? Because it's not, and you should know the truth. In that same way, I would never go up to someone and deride their religion, because whatever helps you be a good person, connect to a higher system of values, you know, to be good in your own life and to be content with yourself and the world, good. And if you believe your baby's pretty, good. If you believe in any one of a different number of gods or saints or spirits, good. Whatever helps you, do good in the world. But if I hear you saying you think you should be allowed to tell people that there's something fundamentally wrong with the existence of gay people, I'm likely to remind you that there's a separation of church and state, and that there's civilized standards that preclude you announcing your hatreds and trying to normalize your personal system of vendettas. So that's all from me today. Thanks for listening, and hope to talk to you again soon. Yeah. Take care. All the best. Take care of yourselves and each other. Spread light and love where you can, and don't be afraid to stand up to bullies and to the normalization of petty hatreds. Whereas if you need anger and hate to at least motivate you to call out nihilists, fascists, destructive people, even communists, you can tell a communist, tell them I sent you. If you need to tell them they're an idiot who needs to learn some history and how communism is just a gateway drug to a form of autocracy and mass murder that has killed a whole bunch of people and should be disavowed much more strongly than capitalism. Capitalism is okay as long as you have a strong system of checks and balances, strong democratic republics that can fight for the interests of the people against the human ability to get involved in a corporation or an organization and then push for profits over the interests of the people, even when they conflict with the interests of the people. You don't want that. You don't want corporations who are happy to cause death and harm and suffering just as long as it increases their bottom line. For that reason, you need guided capitalism. You need a functional democracy. Trying to say, oh, capitalism should die and we should replace it with communism shows a massive, ludicrous ignorance of what has happened across every single nation that has attempted to supplant capitalism with communism. It's mayhem. It's centralized power that can't deal with criticism or feedback, and therefore pushes ahead with things that cause man-made genocides, man-made famines, disruption of industry and starvation, re-education camps, and just horrors, similar horrors to those associated with fascism, just the deaths of tens of millions of people. That's just my little, 2 cents about communism there to show that, yes, the horseshoe is real. There is far left autocracy and far right autocracy. Far right worries me more at this point in time, but I'm always happy and ready. Yeah, time to go. I will go. All right. I got to go get my children. See you, everyone. Bye.